Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so we're looking at something genuinely magnificent today, the 2026 World Cup. I mean, think about it. Summer of 26, 48 teams chasing glory across North America, giving millions of us something absolutely beautiful to stare at. But today, we're looking right past the spectacle. We're looking past the cheering crowds, the highlight reels, and the blinding stadium lights. Instead, we're going to focus entirely on the actual economic math happening quietly in the background.
Okay, let's dive into this. What really happens when the confetti is finally swept off the field on July 20th and everybody goes home? Well, the truth is, hosting a mega event like this often masks some pretty serious underlying economic rot. Now, the tournament itself doesn't cause what's coming, but it acts as this massive, beautiful distraction while reality arrives. And to really understand how this works, we need to look at how two very different people navigate the exact same event.
So, meet Tyler and Sophia. On paper, these two are identical. Same age, same income, living in the exact same World Cup host city. But their reactions to the event? Wildly different. Tyler, our optimist, goes all out. He buys a $1,200 ticket package on his credit card, upgrades his TV, the whole shebang. He just assumes this promised economic boom will eventually trickle down to him. Then we have Sophia, the pragmatist. She buys exactly one cheap ticket in cash, watches the rest of the games from a friend's couch, and parks her leftover cash in a high-yield savings account. She's skeptical, you know? She actually wants to see the arithmetic behind the headlines.
And honestly, those headlines are massive. Just listen to this number, $17 billion. That's a huge number. This is the promised U.S. economic windfall that mayors, city councils, and FIFA have been aggressively pitching to the public. It's exactly the kind of massive round figure that makes leaders vote yes on hosting, without ever really reading the fine print.
But, as Sophia discovered, there's a catch. The source of that $17 billion figure? It's FIFA, literally the very organization collecting the money, right? When independent firms actually run the math, the picture changes dramatically. The Boston Consulting Group found that the short-term activity is probably closer to just $5 billion, and that's spread across all of North America. That is a fraction of the hype. And it gets worse. Independent economists point out that whatever temporary event revenue does come in mostly flows right up to the organizers, like FIFA, not down to the local businesses. Basically, the city just gets the traffic jams and the cleanup bill.
And you know what? We don't even have to wait until 2026 to see this play out. The economic sugar high is already underperforming in real time. Take these early indicators. 80% of host city hotels are booking below forecast. Final bookings in New York, only 65%. Meanwhile, sky-high dynamic ticket pricing is turning a simple family outing into the cost of a used car, literally pushing tickets from $800 up to $43,000. No way. And then there's the couch potato effect. This is where regular tourists avoid the host city because of the chaos, and locals just stay home on their couches to dodge the crowds. This means the event can actually chase off the ordinary money that would have shown up anyway. So while Tyler is blindly enjoying the matches, the actual data is completely validating Sophia's skepticism.
Which brings us to indicator number 1, the government's debt spiral.
So, if the World Cup is just a temporary, overhyped sugar rush, what's the actual state of the economy hosting it? Well, we need to look at 4 pretty grim macroeconomic indicators, starting with the national debt. This is the reality the government is completely ignoring. Kind of like how Tyler ignores his credit card bill. The United States government owes over $39 trillion. To put the sheer speed of that into perspective for you, the country piled on its most recent $1 trillion of debt in under 5 months. Outside of a world war or a massive global financial crisis, the country has essentially never borrowed this fast in peacetime.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how that massive debt translates into daily reality. Get this, for the first time in history, the U.S. will spend over $1 trillion this year just on interest payments. We're not paying down the principal here, we are just renting the money. That interest bill is now larger than the entire American defense budget. It's even larger than Medicare.
And that brings us to a pretty chilling historical rule from historian Niall Ferguson. He notes that, basically, any great power which ends up spending more on interest payments than on its own defense is a great power on the way down. This right here is the absolute danger of a debt spiral. It's like a trap. The more you owe, the more interest you pay. The more interest you pay, the more you have to borrow just to cover it. The debt simply eats the future.
Moving on to indicator number 2, a stall speed economy.
We've seen the massive debt, but what about the actual engine of the economy itself? Well, this brings us to the quiet disappearance of growth and how external shocks are really threatening everyday consumers. Forecasters have been quietly trimming down their growth expectations to a very sluggish 1.25 to 1.75%. In the trade, they actually call this stall speed. It's basically the point where an economy is moving so slowly that it really doesn't take much of a bump to knock it clean out of the sky.
And the thing is, those shocks, they're already happening. When conflict sparks in the Middle East, gas prices can spike from $3.14 to $4.50 almost overnight. That acts as an unavoidable, unvoted pay cut for literally every driver in the country. It just slows down the consumer engine that keeps the economy aloft. When you combine this sluggish growth with rising prices, forecasters start throwing around terms like stagflation-light, which is basically a weaker economy holding hands with a fatter grocery bill.
All right, indicator number 3, the K-shaped consumer.
Now, this macroeconomic pressure is absolutely not felt equally across the board. In fact, it's violently splitting the American middle class into two completely different directions. In a K-shaped economy, the people at the top, well, their line goes up. They're doing better than ever. But the people at the bottom, their line goes down. They are quietly coming apart at the seams. And here's the crucial point. Because the top is doing so incredibly well, the average economic data looks completely fine. It entirely hides the pain of working-class households drowning in debt, while wealthy fans can casually drop $40,000 on a single soccer ticket.
The numbers for that bottom line of the K are just stark. American households are carrying a record $18 trillion in total debt, with $1.25 trillion of that sitting directly on credit cards. And remember, these aren't cheap loans. Average credit card interest rates are running anywhere between 15 and 21%. Meanwhile, savings rates have totally collapsed down to 4%, and quiet costs like tariffs are adding anywhere from $1,000 to $1,700 a year to average household expenses. People aren't loading up their credit cards to go out and buy jet skis, you know. They are just using debt to tread water against the rising baseline costs of daily life. So, bringing it back to our two fans, we see this play out perfectly. Tyler pays the friendly, small minimum balance on his 21% credit card. His debt is basically acting as a temporary crumple zone, absorbing the impact of the economy so he doesn't really feel it yet. Sophia, meanwhile, parks her extra cash in a totally boring high-yield savings account. So while Tyler's money is secretly working against him in the dark, Sophia's boring math is quietly protecting her.
And finally, indicator number 4, the stock market mirage.
This is exactly where the optimists point to justify their spending. They genuinely believe the old rules of financial valuation simply no longer apply. But we have to look at the CAPE ratio. This is a measure of how expensive stocks are compared to actual company earnings, smoothed out over 10 years to remove any distortions. Now, its long-run historical average is around 17. But this summer, this ratio crossed 40. To put that into perspective, in over 150 years of records, that height has only been seen one other time. 1999, at the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble.
And this concentration of wealth brilliantly illustrates another major issue. The entire market's weight is dangerously concentrated right now. Roughly 37% of the entire index is driven by the Magnificent Seven, just 7 massive tech companies. The rest of the market makes up the other 63%. So the market isn't this broad, stable foundation right now. It's leaning its full weight on just 7 single points of failure.
Even Warren Buffett has a favored metric for this, comparing the total value of the stock market to the size of the whole economy. As he puts it, when that pushes past 200%, you're playing with fire. Well, it recently hit 220%. Because of these sky-high valuations, experts are forecasting a grinding decade ahead, where stocks might return a mere 1.5% a year.
Let's wrap this up. The conclusion? Fireworks versus the ledger. We really have to look at all 4 of these massive, fundamental macroeconomic indicators standing squarely in the shadow of the greatest sporting spectacle on Earth. The ancient Romans actually had a phrase for this: bread and circuses. It was this tactic of using grand spectacles to keep a nervous population looking up at the show instead of looking down at the ledger. Now, nobody planned the 2026 World Cup as some sinister conspiracy, but history shows us that a country can be both genuinely thrilled and genuinely in trouble at the exact same time. The games tend to get biggest right about when the math gets the worst. So, what happens the morning after the tournament ends? Tyler, whose optimism led him to totally ignore the underlying math, finds himself stuck paying double for his TV due to compound interest. And when the stall-speed economy trims his work hours, he has zero cushion. Sophia, on the other hand, survives the stall-speed economy by winning through not losing. Now, in most years in American history, Tyler's optimism wins. But in this specific, rare moment of crushing debt and sky-high valuations, Sophia's boring, math-based caution is absolutely what allows her to survive the inevitable hangover.
The World Cup doesn't cause economic decline, it's just a beautiful backdrop. The real plot is the math quietly compounding underneath it all. When the stands finally empty out and the tourists fly home, the economy will be exactly what the math always said it was. So as you look at your own financial choices moving forward, I want you to ask yourself this one crucial question. Did you count the zeros or did you just count the fireworks? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.